Breaking overnight, the Supreme Court has unanimously ruled the Trump administration must facilitate the return of a Maryland father who was deported by mistake to a notorious El Salvador prison nearly a month ago. The court, however, stopped short of ordering Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be returned to the U.S. or giving a deadline to make it happen. And this morning, both sides are claiming victory here. CNN Chief Supreme Court analyst Joan Biskupic is joining us now to talk more about this. Joan, a couple things to note. Both sides claiming this victory, also this unanimous ruling from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you can see that it was a compromise here, just by virtue of that, of its unanimity. And I'll also mention where three of the liberals peeled off on a key part. But it's great to see you, Jessica. And I'll tell you why both sides are claiming victory at this point, because we're just at one other incremental step in this. There's just so much more to come. As you said, the Supreme Court said that the Trump administration has to facilitate. It's not required to bring him back. It said that the lower court judge still has to give due deference to the administration in terms of its foreign policy here. It stressed that it's not mandating an immediate order. It didn't set any kind of deadline, but crucial, the lower court judge Paul Zinnes in a Maryland district court last night, right after the Supreme Court ruled, immediately jumped on it and set some new requirements for the administration, saying it had to tell her the current physical location and custodial status of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, what steps, if any, they were taking to facilitate his immediate return to the U.S., and she wanted to know when that could happen. And she's going to hold a hearing today. So in kind of a theoretical vein, the administration largely won on some arguments, just that the judge would have to defer to the administration in that way. But I have to say that where, there's a very big practical consideration here of how much it can continue to stall if it wants to, and also whether the administration actually is saying what's true, that it's no longer really in charge here because he's in the custody of the Salvadoran government. So can the administration bring him back? So it's a very difficult situation all around. As a threshold matter, this Maryland father did win on his arguments that he should be able to be returned to the U.S., that the administration screwed up, to use the language of a lower court judge. The administration did screw up. But what kind of remedy can actually take place here is still in question. And we'll know later today, Jessica, when Judge Zinnes holds her hearing.
Yeah, that is the big question. What is the remedy here? More to come. Joan, always great to see you on a Friday morning. Sure. Thank you so much.
The man who was deported by mistake to a notorious prison in El Salvador. Well, the Supreme Court is telling the Trump administration to bring him home. In a unanimous decision, the justices ruled that the White House must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, but the court stopped short of mandating his immediate return. This decision is being taken by both sides as a victory. Garcia's lawyer saying the rule of law prevailed. They need to stop wasting time and get moving. The Trump administration claiming that the ruling, quote, illustrates that activist judges do not have jurisdiction over foreign policy. Now, in the meantime, Garcia's wife and family are left wondering when they're going to see him again.
We're very hurt. My kids ask daily, when is dad coming home? My husband is not a gang member. He's actually an amazing father, an amazing husband. That's who he truly is. The last time I spoke to him was March 15th, when they were about to abort a plane. And since then, I haven't heard from him.
So here's where things stand this morning. It's going to be up to a lower court to clarify a previous order mandating Garcia's return. Joining me now to make sense of all of this, Akayla Gardner, White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, Andrew Egger, White House correspondent for The Bulwark, and Haima Moore, former chief of staff for DNC Chairman Jamie Harrison. Y'all, welcome to the group chat on a Friday morning. Sorry, we're starting with some pretty dark news, but Akayla, I want to start with you. The White House at first was kind of joking about the way they were shipping people off and fighting the courts. After this moment, what kind of messaging are we seeing about what the courts are saying about due process and what needs to happen?
We still have yet to see the White House respond about this specific case, but I think what stands out to me is this really follows a major victory that they had on Monday, where the court upheld their use of the Alien Enemies Act and still...
Or at least didn't get in the way of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing with this case, as that order said, there is due process for individuals. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And I think we'll continue to see is more people bringing individual cases, because in that particular case with the Supreme Court, they said grouping these migrants together was not the right way to go about this, criticizing the ACLU. So I think we're going to continue to see more individual cases. But the White House originally said this was an administrative error. And yet at the same time, they've doubled down and said they believe he is a gang member. So I think we're going to continue to see the White House and the Justice Department really pushing back on this idea.
They're calling it a clerical error, but I'm under the impression that the head of El Salvador, the president, is coming to the U.S. He's been very, he lets them run around taking photographs and bringing cameras into the prison, so obviously they have some sway. How is the argument holding up, do you think, as people talk about this online, about why they can't bring him home?
Well, that's what's been so unusual about this case, right, is that you almost have the situation where lawless or extra-legal action breeds lawless or extra-legal action. There's this very unusual setup where President Bukele is essentially functioning as the White House's jailer for these people. But at the same time, the administration argues that because El Salvador is a sovereign nation, that limits the amount that they can actually be compelled to go and ask to get a guy like this back. And so what you get what on its face would be a very straightforward Supreme Court ruling. Yeah, he deserves due process. Yes, you need to give it to him. And instead starts to implicate some of these national security conversations, and that's where you get into the parsing out between facilitating his return and effectuating his return. And it does give the White House a lot of room to kind of say, well, we're going to do what we can to get him back. But it's this very strange split screen where they have been ordered to try, but it's not at all clear what enforcing them really trying would look like.
Jaime, one of the things I'm interested in is way back when, during Trump 1, when their big deterrence policy was separating migrant families at the border. And Democrats spent a lot of time saying, look at these children. Yeah. Children are in cages. That did not necessarily move the public against Republicans on immigration policy. The president still enjoys good kind of polling numbers around policy. So how do you talk about this now?
Look, I think we've talked about this for a long time. I think Democrats, Republicans, independents. I think yeah. No, you're right. I think most people are okay with immigration reform when you talk about it in ways of making the country safer and making processes for people to become legal citizens a better process. But I think Donald Trump, this has been embarrassing for the country. This is not about him having good immigration policies. This is about the United States government making a mistake. And we've seen a lot of incompetency over the last couple of weeks. And this proves that I think Donald Trump, while he does have a lot of support around getting people out of this country, making it safer, he does not have support to just go in people's homes and rip them away and take them away and put them in El Salvador. Right. And so I think Democrats...
Or Louisiana, which we've been talking about with students who are on student visas that have been revoked. I think that number, according to the State Department, is more than 400 visas who have been revoked. And, when I think about how Marco Rubio has been talking about this, I want you guys to hear, because I think it sounds like a very kind of common sense response.
A student visa is like me inviting you into my home. If you come into my home and put all kinds of crap on my couch, I'm going to kick you out of my house. And so, that's what we're doing with our country, thanks to the president.
I don't know when it takes this, but that's a laugh line in the room. And I think in the heat of the protests over Gaza, there were a lot of the public that just felt like they were very upset with these students. Now, all this time later, how is it coming across? I don't know what it's like in Bulwark land, but how is it coming across to yank student visas, ship them to Louisiana, and throw away the key because of something they said?
Well, and I think that gets at it. I think it depends what you mean by these students, right? Because there were a lot of scenes of disorder, chaos, potential law breaking that were taking place during protests last year. And that's exactly it. And this is a completely different thing. I mean, we're seeing people who have been essentially had their legal presence in America vaporized because of a perfect perfectly kind of polite and cogent op-ed that they wrote in a student paper, just arguing that the administration ought to participate in the BDS movement, things like that, things that are a far cry from I think that potentially more commonsensical reaction against some of the disorder that we saw last year. But the administration is using kind of the memory of that, the atmosphere of that, to push the door far wider open.